Good evening, dear listener. Tonight, we open the pages of one of the most enchanting tales ever told. But before we begin, if these quiet stories bring you peace, take a moment to like this video and subscribe. I'd truly love to know where you're listening from and what hour of the night finds you here. Our little circle now stretches across oceans, bound by stories and calm. So dim the lights, let the air grow still, and let your mind wander gently with me into tonight's story. The Fisherman and His Wife. There was once a fisherman and his wife who lived together in a hovel by the seashore, and the fisherman went out every day with his hook and line to catch fish, and he angled and angled. One day he was sitting with his rod and looking into the clear water, and he sat and sat. At last down went the line to the bottom of the water, and when he drew it up, he found a great flounder on the hook. And the flounder said to him, "Fisherman, listen to me. Let me go. I am not a real fish, but an enchanted prince. What good shall I be to you if you land me? I shall not taste well, so put me back into the water again, and let me swim away." "Well," said the fisherman, "no need of so many words about the matter. As you can speak, I had much rather let you swim away." Then he put him back into the clear water, and the flounder sank to the bottom, leaving a long streak of blood behind him. Then the fisherman got up and went home to his wife in their hovel. "Well, husband," said the wife, "have you caught nothing today?" "No," said the man. "That is, I did catch a flounder, but as he said he was an enchanted prince, I let him go again." "Then did you wish for nothing?" said the wife. "No," said the man. "What should I wish for?" "Oh dear," said the wife, "and it is so dreadful always to live in this evil-smelling hovel. You might as well have wished for a little cottage. Go again and call him. Tell him we want a little cottage. I dare say he will give it us. Go, and be quick." And when he went back, the sea was green and yellow, and not nearly so clear. So he stood and said, oh man, if man you be, or flounder, flounder, in the sea. Such a tiresome wife I've got, for she wants what I do not." Then the flounder came swimming up, and said, "Now then, what does she want?" "Oh," said the man, "you know when I caught you, my wife says I ought to have wished for something. She does not want to live any longer in the hovel, and would rather have a cottage." "Go home with you," said the flounder. "She has it already." So the man went home, and found instead of the hovel a little cottage, and his wife was sitting on a bench before the door. And she took him by the hand, and said to him, "Come in, and see if this is not a great improvement." So they went in, and there was a little house place, and a beautiful little bedroom, a kitchen and larder, with all sorts of furniture, and iron and brass ware of the very best. And at the back was a little yard with fowls and ducks, and a little garden full of green vegetables and fruit. "Look," said the wife, "is not that nice?" "Yes," said the man. "If this can only last, we shall be very well contented." "We will see about that," said the wife. And after a meal they went to bed. So all went well for a week or fortnight, when the wife said, "Look here, husband, the cottage is really too confined, and the yard and garden are so small. I think the flounder had better get us a larger house. I should like very much to live in a large stone castle. So go to your fish, and he will send us a castle." "Oh, my dear wife," said the man, "the cottage is good enough. What do we want a castle for?" "We want one," said the wife. "Go along with you. The flounder can give us one." "Now, wife," said the man. "The flounder gave us the cottage. I do not like to go to him again. He may be angry." "Go along," said the wife. "He might just as well give us it as not. Do as I say." The man felt very reluctant and unwilling, and he said to himself, "It is not the right thing to do." Nevertheless, he went. So when he came to the seaside, the water was purple and dark blue and gray and thick, and not green and yellow as before. And he stood and said, O man, if man you be, or flounder, in the sea, such a tiresome wife I've got, for she wants what I do not." "Now then, what does she want?" said the flounder. "Oh," said the man, half frightened, "she wants to live in a large stone castle." "Go home with you. She is already standing before the door," said the flounder. Then the man went home, as he supposed. But when he got there stood in the place of the cottage a great castle of stone, and his wife was standing on the steps, about to go in. So she took him by the hand and said, "Let us enter." With that he went in with her, and in the castle was a great hall with a marble pavement, and there were a great many servants, who led them through large doors, and the passages were decked with tapestry, and the rooms with golden chairs and tables, and crystal chandeliers hanging from the ceiling. And all the rooms had carpets, and the tables were covered with eatables, and the best wine for anyone who wanted them. And at the back of the house was a great stable yard for horses and cattle, and carriages of the finest. Besides, there was a splendid large garden, with the most beautiful flowers and fine fruit trees, and a pleasance full 1/2 mile long, with deer and oxen and sheep and everything that heart could wish for. "There," said the wife, "is not this beautiful?" "Oh yes," said the man. "If it will only last, we can live in this fine castle and be very well contented." "We will see about that," said the wife. "In the meanwhile, we will sleep upon it." With that, they went to bed. The next morning the wife was awake first, just at the break of day, and she looked out and saw from her bed the beautiful country lying all round. The man took no notice of it, so she poked him in the side with her elbow, and said, "Husband, get up and just look out of the window. Look, just think if we could be king over all this country. Just go to your fish and tell him we should like to be king." "Now, wife," said the man, "what should we be kings for? I don't want to be king." "Well," said the wife, "if you don't want to be king, I will be king." "Now, wife," said the man, "what do you want to be king for? I could not ask him such a thing." "Why not?" said the wife. "You must go directly all the same. I must be king." So the man went, very much put out that his wife should want to be king. "It is not the right thing to do, not at all the right thing," thought the man. He did not at all want to go, and yet he went all the same. And when he came to the sea, the water was quite dark gray, and rushed far inland, and had an ill smell. And he stood and said, O man, if man you be, or flounder, in the sea, such a tiresome wife I've got, for she wants what I do not." "Now then, what does she want?" said the fish. "Oh dear," said the man, "she wants to be king." "Go home with you, she is so already," said the fish. So the man went back, and as he came to the palace, he saw it was very much larger, and had great towers and splendid gateways. The herald stood before the door, and a number of soldiers with kettle drums and trumpets. And when he came inside, everything was of marble and gold, and there were many curtains with great golden tassels. Then he went through the doors of the saloon, to where the great throne room was. And there was his wife sitting upon a throne of gold and diamonds, and she had a great golden crown on, and the scepter in her hand was of pure gold and jewels. And on each side stood 6 pages in a row, each one a head shorter than the other. So the man went up to her and said, "Well, wife, so now you are king." "Yes," said the wife, "now I am king." So then he stood and looked at her, and when he had gazed at her for some time, he said, "Well, wife, this is fine for you to be king. Now there is nothing more to wish for." "O husband," said the wife, seeming quite restless, "I am tired of this already. Go to your fish and tell him that now I am king, I must be emperor." "Now, wife," said the man, "what do you want to be emperor for?" "Husband," said she, "go and tell the fish I want to be emperor." "Oh dear," said the man, "he could not do it. I cannot ask him such a thing. There is but one emperor at a time. The fish can't possibly make anyone emperor. Indeed, he can't." "Now look here," said the wife, "I am king, and you are only my husband. So will you go at once? Go along. For if he was able to make me king, he is able to make me emperor, and I will and must be emperor. So go along." So he was obliged to go. And as he went, he felt very uncomfortable about it. And he thought to himself, "It is not at all the right thing to do. To want to be emperor is really going too far. The flounder will soon be beginning to get tired of this." With that he came to the sea, and the water was quite black and thick, and the foam flew, and the wind blew, and the man was terrified. But he stood and said, O man, if man you be, or flounder, flounder in the sea. Such a tiresome wife I've got, for she wants what I do not." "What is it now?" said the fish. "Oh dear," said the man, "my wife wants to be emperor." "Go home with you," said the fish. "She is emperor already." So the man went home, and found the castle adorned with polished marble and alabaster figures, and golden gates. The troops were being marshaled before the door, and they were blowing trumpets and beating drums and cymbals. And when he entered, he saw barons and earls and dukes waiting about like servants, and the doors were of bright gold. And he saw his wife sitting upon a throne made of one entire piece of gold, and it was about 2 miles high. And she had a great golden crown on, which was about 3 yards high, set with brilliants and carbuncles. And in one hand she held the scepter, and in the other the globe. And on both sides of her stood pages in 2 rows, all arranged according to their size, from the most enormous giant of 2 miles high to the tiniest dwarf of the size of my little finger. And before her stood earls and dukes in crowds. So the man went up to her and said, "Well, wife, so now you are emperor." "Yes," said she, "now I am emperor." Then he went and sat down and had a good look at her, and then he said, "Well now, wife, there is nothing left to be. Now you are emperor." "What are you talking about, husband?" said she. "I am emperor, and next I will be pope. So go and tell the fish so." "Oh dear," said the man, "what is it that you don't want? You can never become pope. There is but one pope in Christendom, and the fish can't possibly do it." "Husband," said she, "no more words about it. I must and will be pope, so go along to the fish." "Now, wife," said the man, "how can I ask him such a thing? It is too bad. It is asking a little too much, and besides, he could not do it." "What rubbish," said the wife. "If he could make me emperor, he can make me pope. Go along and ask him. I am emperor, and you are only my husband. so go you must." So he went, feeling very frightened, and he shivered and shook, and his knees trembled. And there arose a great wind, and the clouds flew by, and it grew very dark, and the sea rose mountains high, and the ships were tossed about, and the sky was partly blue in the middle, but at the sides very dark and red, as in a great tempest. And he felt very desponding, and stood trembling, and said, O man, if man you be, or flounder, flounder in the sea, such a tiresome wife I've got, for she wants what I do not." "Well, what now?" said the fish. "Oh dear," said the man, "she wants to be pope." "Go home with you, she is pope already," said the fish. So he went home, and he found himself before a great church, with palaces all round. He had to make his way through a crowd of people, and when he got inside, he found the place lighted up with thousands and thousands of lights, and his wife was clothed in a golden garment, and sat upon a very high throne, and had 3 golden crowns on, all in the greatest priestly pomp. And on both sides of her there stood 2 rows of lights of all sizes, from the size of the longest tower to the smallest rushlight. And all the emperors and kings were kneeling before her and kissing her foot. "Well, wife," said the man, and sat and stared at her, "so you are pope." "Yes," said she, "now I am pope." And he went on gazing at her till he felt dazzled, as if he were sitting in the sun. And after a little time he said, "Well now, wife, what is there left to be, now you are pope?" And she sat up very stiff and straight, and said nothing. And he said again, "Well, wife, I hope you are contented at last with being pope. You can be nothing more. We will see about that," said the wife. With that they both went to bed, but she was as far as ever from being contented, and she could not get to sleep for thinking of what she should like to be next. The husband, however, slept as fast as a top after his busy day, but the wife tossed and turned from side to side the whole night through, thinking all the while what she could be next, but nothing would occur to her. And when she saw the red dawn, she slipped off the bed and sat before the window to see the sun rise, and as it came up she said, "Ah, I have it. What if I should make the sun and moon to rise, husband?" she cried, and stuck her elbow in his ribs. "Wake up, and go to your fish, and tell him tea want power over the sun and moon." The man was so fast asleep that when he started up he fell out of bed. Then he shook himself together and opened his eyes and said, "Oh, wife, what did you say?" "Husband," said she, "if I cannot get the power of making the sun and moon rise when I want them, I shall never have another quiet hour. Go to the fish and tell him so." "Oh, wife," said the man, and fell on his knees to her, "the fish can really not do that for you. I grant you he could make you emperor and pope. Do be contented with that, I beg of you." And she became wild with impatience and screamed out, "I can wait no longer. Go at once." And so off he went as well as he could for fright, and a dreadful storm arose, so that he could hardly keep his feet, and the houses and trees were blown down, and the mountains trembled, and rocks fell in the sea. The sky was quite black, and it thundered and lightened, and the waves, crowned with foam, ran mountains high. So he cried out, without being able to hear his own words, O man, if man you be, or flounder, flounder in the sea, such a tiresome wife I've got, for she wants what I do not." "Well, what now?" said the flounder. "Oh dear," said the man, "she wants to order about the sun and moon." "Go home with you," said the flounder. "You will find her in the old hovel. and there they are sitting to this very day. Domestic servants. 2 travelers met upon a narrow forest path, where the shadows of the pines crossed one another like black ribbons. They halted, gazed, and spoke in the old sing-song manner of wayfarers. "Whither goest thou, stranger?" asked the first, raising his staff. "To Walpa," answered the second with a nod. "Then I to Walpa, and thou to Walpa. So, together we'll go, step by step, road by road." And with that they fell into stride, their voices weaving like a chant. "Tell me, hast thou a man? For a house without a man is but a hearth without fire." I have a man," said the traveler, "and his name is Cham." "Cham, sayest thou? Then my man Cham, thy man Cham. I to Walpa, thou to Walpa. So together we'll go, staff by staff, song by song." They walked further, and the forest thickened. Again the first spoke. "Hast thou a child? For where there is a child, there is both burden and blessing." "I have a child indeed. He is called Wild. Ah, then my child Wild, thy child Wild, my man Cham, thy man Cham. I to Walpa, thou to Walpa. So together we'll go, heart by heart, mile by mile." Soon they came upon a clearing where the moon shone pale. There the question rose again. "Hast thou a cradle, good fellow? For every wild must sleep, and every song must have its rest." "A cradle have I, and Hippodotl is its name." "Then my cradle Hippodotl, thy cradle Hippodotl, my child Wild, thy child Wild, my man Cham, thy man Cham. I to Walpa, thou to Walpa. So, together we'll go, dream by dream, night by night." Their steps grew heavier, yet their chant flowed on. The first turned once more and asked, "Hast thou also a drudge, a faithful hand who bears the toil and bends beneath the yoke? For no house is kept without labor, and no road is trod without dust." "I have such a one," said the second, "and his name is Long. From thy work do not budge." "Ah, a name weighty as a millstone. Then my drudge from thy work do not budge, thy drudge from thy work do not budge. My cradle Hippodotl, thy cradle Hippodotl, my child Wild, thy child Wild, my man Cham, thy man Cham. I to Walpa, thou to Walpa. So, together we'll go, burden by burden, bond by bond." And as they went on, their voices grew louder, echoing against the dark trunks. So, to Walpi we go, with man and child, with cradle and drudge, with name and song, with step and breath. I to Walpa, thou to Walpa, never alone, but always together. So, together we'll go. Thus they walked until the night swallowed them, and only the rhythm of their chant remained, as though the forest itself carried the tale forward. Domestic servants. 2 travelers met upon a narrow forest path, where the shadows of the pines crossed one another like black ribbons. They halted, gazed, and spoke in the old sing-song manner of wayfarers. "Whither goest thou, stranger?" asked the first, raising his staff. "To Walpa," answered the second with a nod. "Then I to Walpa, and thou to Walpa. So, together we'll go, step by step, road by road." And with that, they fell into stride, their voices weaving like a chant. "Tell me, hast thou a man? For a house without a man is but a hearth without fire." I have a man," said the traveler, "and his name is Cham." "Cham, sayest thou? Then my man Cham, thy man Cham. I to Walpa, thou to Walpa. So, together we'll go, staff by staff, song by song." They walked further, and the forest thickened. Again the first spoke. "Hast thou a child? For where there is a child, there is both burden and blessing." "I have a child indeed. He is called Wild. Then my child Wild, thy child wild, my man Cham, thy man Cham. I to Walpa, thou to Walpa. So together we'll go, heart by heart, mile by mile. Soon they came upon a clearing where the moon shone pale. There the question rose again. Hast thou a cradle, good fellow? For every wild must sleep, and every song must have its rest. A cradle have I, and Hippodadle is its name. Then my cradle Hippodadle, thy cradle Hippodadle, my child wild, thy child wild, my man Cham, thy man Cham, I to Walpa, thou to Walpa. So together we'll go, dream by dream, night by night. Their steps grew heavier, yet their chant flowed on. The first turned once more and asked, Hast thou also a drudge, a faithful hand who bears the toil and bends beneath the yoke? For no house is kept without labor, and no road is trod without dust. I have such a one, said the second, and his name is Long. From thy work do not budge. Ah, a name weighty as a millstone. Then my drudge from thy work do not budge, thy drudge from thy work do not budge. My cradle Hippodadle, thy cradle Hippodadle, my child wild, thy child wild, my man Cham, thy man Cham. I to Walpa, thou to Walpa. So, together we'll go, burden by burden, bond by bond. And as they went on, their voices grew louder, echoing against the dark trunks. So, to Walpi we go, with man and child, with cradle and drudge, with name and song, with step and breath. I to Walpa, thou to Walpa, never alone, but always together. So, together we'll go. Thus they walked until the night swallowed them, and only the rhythm of their chant remained, as though the forest itself carried the tale forward. St. Joseph in the Forest. Once upon a time, in a quiet valley overshadowed by dark woods and silver hills, there lived a widow with 3 daughters. The eldest was rude of tongue and hard of heart. The second was gentler, though quick to envy. But the youngest was a humble and devout child, as kind as spring rain, and as patient as the grass that grows under frost. Yet the mother, strange and blind in her affections, loved the eldest with foolish fondness, and despised the youngest with cruel disdain. Day after day she set the poor girl to the heaviest labors, scrubbing the pots until her hands bled, fetching water from the far spring, and carrying bundles of wood larger than herself. Often she sent her out into the deep forest on false errands, hoping the wild beasts or the night would keep her forever. But the child's guardian angel, who never leaves a pure heart unaided, guided her steps home each time through the shadows and the wind. One winter's eve, however, the angel seemed to veil his wings and watch from afar. The girl wandered long and far, through thick boughs heavy with frost, until her feet were numb, and her breath came out in white clouds. Twilight deepened into darkness. Then, far off between the trees, she spied a small light flickering like a star fallen to earth. Trembling with cold, yet full of hope, she followed it and came upon a little wooden hut, half buried in snow. She knocked once. A soft voice bade her enter. Inside was warmth and the smell of burning pine. At a second door she knocked again, and there stood an old man with a beard white as milk, his eyes mild and bright as candles in a chapel. It was none other than St. Joseph himself, though she knew it not. "Come in, dear child," said he gently. "Sit by the hearth and warm thy hands. I will bring thee fresh water if thou art thirsty. Yet I have nothing to offer thee but a few roots from the forest floor, which thou must scrape and boil for thy supper." The maiden thanked him and took the roots with grateful heart. From her pouch she brought the small piece of pancake and the crust of bread her mother had given her that morning. the only kindness she ever received. She mixed them with the roots, cooked them into a thick brown soup, and set it by the fire. When all was ready, St. Joseph said, "I am faint with hunger, good child. Give me, I pray thee, a portion of thy meal." Without hesitation, she gave him more than her own share. And though she ate but little, she felt as though she had feasted well, for God's blessing filled her body with warmth and contentment. When the meal was ended, St. Joseph said kindly, "Now we shall rest. I have but one bed, and the straw on the floor. Thou shalt take the bed, and I will lie upon the straw." But she answered, "Oh no, good father, the straw is soft enough for me. Keep thy bed, for thou art old and weary." At this the saint smiled, took her gently in his arms, and laid her himself in the little bed. There she folded her hands, said her evening prayer, and slept as peacefully as an angel. When morning came, sunlight poured through the shutters. She rose and called to thank her host, but St. Joseph was gone. Behind the door she found a heavy leather bag full of gold pieces, so heavy she could scarcely lift it. Upon it was written, "For the child who rested here last night." Overjoyed, she carried the treasure home, her heart light as air. When she gave it to her mother, the woman's greed burned brighter than her cruelty, and for a time she treated her youngest kindly, though only for the gold she brought. The next day, the second daughter grew restless and thought, "If my sister found riches in the wood, why should not I?" So she begged her mother's leave to go. The mother packed for her a great piece of pancake and a thick loaf of bread, saying, "Bring back what fortune sends thee." That evening, the second daughter, too, came upon the hut in the forest and was welcomed by the white-bearded old man. The same roots were given, and she made her supper as her sister had done. When St. Joseph said, "I am hungry, give me of thy food," she replied, "Yes, thou shalt have thy share." And though she gave him somewhat less than half, still she did not grudge him. When the meal was ended and St. Joseph offered her the bed, she said, "Lie thou down in the bed, there is room enough for both." So he took her kindly in his arms, placed her within, and laid himself upon the straw. In the morning he was gone. Behind the door she found a small sack of coins, not heavy like the first, but worth a good measure. On it was written, "For the child who slept here last night." She took it, hid 2 coins secretly in her pocket, and gave the rest to her mother, who praised her, but loved her no more truly. Now the eldest daughter, who was proud and ill-tempered, saw all this and said, "Shall my sisters reap fortune while I sit idle? I will go too, and fetch home a treasure twice as great." Her mother, eager for gain, filled her basket with as many pancakes, cheeses, and breads as she could carry, and sent her forth. In the evening, she reached the same hut and found St. Joseph by the fire. He gave her roots as before. When the soup was ready, he said, "I am so hungry, good child. Give me of thy food." But she answered sharply, "Wait till I am done. If there be aught left, thou mayest have it." She ate greedily till the pot was nearly empty, and the old man had to scrape the dish for crumbs. When night fell, St. Joseph said, "There is but one bed here, and the straw upon the floor. Wilt thou take the bed?" "Indeed I shall," said she, "for I am weary, and thou art old." So she threw herself upon the bed, and left the good man to sleep on the hard straw. In the morning she looked about for her reward. Not seeing him, she searched eagerly behind the door for the bag of gold she thought surely awaited her. Seeing something dark upon the ground, she stooped to seize it. But it clung fast to her nose. She pulled and screamed, yet the thing stretched and grew until she felt it drag her face downward. Then she saw, to her horror, that it was another nose, long and red, hanging fast to her own. She ran from the hut crying and howling until she met St. Joseph on the path. Falling to her knees, she begged him for mercy, promising amendment and humility. Out of pity, the saint touched her nose, and the second one fell away. He gave her 2 farthings and said, "Go, and learn to be humble, for greed brings shame and sorrow." When she came home, her mother stood at the door and cried, "What hast thou brought back, my darling?" "A great bag of gold," the girl lied, "but I dropped it on the way." "Lost it!" shrieked the mother. "We shall find it again." And she seized her daughter's hand and hurried into the forest. But greed leads only to ruin. For as they went, lizards and serpents burst from the earth and coiled around their feet. They hissed and stung until the wicked daughter fell dead upon the ground. The mother fled, screaming, yet one serpent struck her in the heel, and she perished soon after. And so it was that the gentle youngest daughter lived long and peacefully, sharing her gold with the poor and praising God for his mercy, while the forest kept silent watch over the place where pride and cruelty met their end. Sharing joy and sorrow. Once upon a time, in a small town where the streets were narrow and the houses pressed close together, there lived a tailor. He was skilled enough with his needle and thread, and his hands could fashion coats and cloaks that fit a man as though they had grown upon him. Yet, though his craft was nimble, his temper was hard, and his tongue was sharper than his scissors. He was, in truth, a quarrelsome fellow, and he bore within him little kindness for his wife. Now his wife was of a very different nature. She was gentle and pious, industrious from morning until night, and careful that her home should always be clean and ordered. She rose early with the first light, swept the floor, kindled the fire, and set the bread to bake, all before her husband had so much as rubbed the sleep from his eyes. She spoke little, but when she did, her words were soft and reasonable, seeking only to calm storms before they broke. Yet no matter what she did, she could not win her husband's favor. If she laid the table with care, he found fault with the bread. If she patched his coat with neat stitches, he mocked her for crooked seams. If she prayed, he scolded her for idleness. If she worked, he said she worked too slowly. And worse still, he often struck her, so that she bore not only sorrow in her heart, but bruises upon her skin. The neighbors saw and shook their heads, and at length the authorities heard whispers of his cruelty. They summoned the tailor, and for his harshness he was cast into prison. There he was fed on nothing but coarse bread and water, and he sat upon the cold stones and thought of his misdeeds. After some time had passed, the judges released him, hoping he had grown wiser. Yet before they let him go, they made him swear a solemn promise. Never again should he raise his hand against his wife, but he must live in peace with her, share joy and sorrow with her, and keep the bond of marriage as God had ordained. The tailor bowed and swore, for what else could he do? And he returned home. For a little while, things seemed better. He curbed his anger, and his wife dared to hope that her days of suffering were at an end. She went about her work with lighter steps, and even the neighbors said, Perhaps the tailor has mended his ways. But evil habits are like deep-rooted weeds. Pull them up once, and they grow again with twice the strength. So it was with the tailor. Before long, his surliness returned, and because he feared to break his oath by striking her with his fists, he found new ways to torment her. When displeased, he seized her by the hair and tore it out in handfuls. When she fled from him, he pursued her into the yard, brandishing his yard measure like a cudgel and his long scissors like a dagger. He hurled them after her with cruel laughter, and when they struck her, he laughed for joy. But when they missed, he stormed and swore until the air rang with curses. This wicked game lasted so long that the poor woman could bear it no more. She cried out, and her neighbors, moved by pity, came running. They led her away from her husband's fury and brought the matter again before the magistrates. The tailor stood before the judges, his cap in hand, and they reminded him sternly of his oath. "Did you not promise," they said, "to live in peace with your wife and to harm her no more?" "Indeed, dear gentleman," answered the tailor with feigned humility, "I have kept my word. I have not beaten her, as you well know. I have shared joy and sorrow with her, as a husband must." The judges frowned. "How can this be," said one, "when your wife comes again and again with heavy complaints of your cruelty?" "Ah, learned sirs," replied the tailor, twisting his words as deftly as he twisted thread, "you do not understand. I have not beaten her, no, never with my fists. Only because she looked so strange at times, I wished to comb her hair with my hand, but she fled from me spitefully, as though she had been wronged. Then I, being her husband, hurried after her, and in order to bring her back to her duty, I threw at her whatever lay close at hand, my yard measure, my scissors, or what else the Lord provided. These were but well-meant admonitions. And as for sharing joy and sorrow, I have done so most faithfully. For whenever I struck her, I was full of joy, and she of sorrow. And when I missed her, then she was joyful, and I was sorry. Thus joy and sorrow have we shared alike, each in turn." When the judges heard this shameless excuse, they looked upon one another with grave faces. "This man twists words as he twists cloth," said the eldest. "He makes mockery of justice and torment of his wife." So they gave him not the freedom he desired, but the punishment he deserved, and the quarrelsome tailor was taught that neither wit nor cunning can hide wickedness forever. The Hare and the Hedgehog. This story, my dear young folks, seems to be false, but it really is true, for my grandfather, from whom I have it, used always, when relating it, to say complacently, "It must be true, my son, or else no one could tell it to you." The story is as follows. One Sunday morning about harvest time, just as the buckwheat was in bloom, the sun was shining brightly in heaven. The east wind was blowing warmly over the stubble fields. The larks were singing in the air, the bees buzzing among the buckwheat. The people were all going in their Sunday clothes to church, and all creatures were happy, and the hedgehog was happy too. The hedgehog, however, was standing by his door with his arms akimbo, enjoying the morning breezes, and slowly trilling a little song to himself, which was neither better nor worse than the songs which hedgehogs are in the habit of singing on a blessed Sunday morning. Whilst he was thus singing half aloud to himself, it suddenly occurred to him that, while his wife was washing and drying the children, he might very well take a walk into the field and see how his turnips were going on. The turnips were, in fact, close beside his house, and he and his family were accustomed to eat them, for which reason he looked upon them as his own. No sooner said than done. The hedgehog shut the house door behind him and took the path to the field. He had not gone very far from home, and was just turning round the sloe bush which stands there outside the field to go up into the turnip field, when he observed the hare, who had gone out on business of the same kind, namely, to visit his cabbages. When the hedgehog caught sight of the hare, he bade him a friendly good morning, but the hare, who was in his own way a distinguished gentleman and frightfully haughty, did not return the hedgehog's greeting, but said to him, assuming at the same time a very contemptuous manner, "How do you happen to be running about here in the field so early in the morning?" "I am taking a walk," said the hedgehog. "A walk," said the hare with a smile. "It seems to me that you might use your legs for a better purpose." This answer made the hedgehog furiously angry, for he can bear anything but an attack on his legs, just because they are crooked by nature. So now the hedgehog said to the hare, "You seem to imagine that you can do more with your legs than I with mine." "That is just what I do think," said the hare. "That can be put to the test," said the hedgehog. "I wager that if we run a race, I will outstrip you." "That is ridiculous, you with your short legs," said the hare. "But for my part I am willing, if you have such a monstrous fancy for it. What shall we wager?" "A golden louis d'or and a bottle of brandy," said the hedgehog. "Done," said the hare. "Shake hands on it, and then we may as well come off at once." "Nay," said the hedgehog, "there is no such great hurry. I am still fasting. I will go home first and have a little breakfast. In half an hour I will be back again at this place." Hereupon the hedgehog departed, for the hare was quite satisfied with this. On his way the hedgehog thought to himself, "The hare relies on his long legs, but I will contrive to get the better of him. He may be a great man, but he is a very silly fellow, and he shall pay for what he has said." So when the hedgehog reached home, he said to his wife, "Wife, dress thyself quickly, thou must go out to the field with me." "What is going on then?" said his wife. "I have made a wager with the hare for a gold louis d'or and a bottle of brandy. I am to run a race with him, and thou must be present." "Ah, good heavens, husband," the wife now cried, "art thou not right in thy mind? Hast thou completely lost thy wits? What can make thee want to run a race with the hare?" "Hold thy tongue, woman," said the hedgehog. "That is my affair. Don't begin to discuss things which are matters for men. Be off, dress thyself, and come with me." What could the hedgehog's wife do? She was forced to obey him, whether she liked it or not. So when they had set out on their way together, the hedgehog said to his wife, "Now pay attention to what I am going to say. Look you, I will make the long field our race course. The hare shall run in one furrow, and I in another, and we will begin to run from the top. Now all that thou hast to do is to place thyself here below in the furrow. And when the hare arrives at the end of the furrow, on the other side of thee, thou must cry out to him, 'I am here already, ye.'" Then they reached the field, and the hedgehog showed his wife her place, and then walked up the field. When he reached the top, the hare was already there. "Shall we start?" said the hare. "Certainly," said the hedgehog. Then both at once. So saying, each placed himself in his own furrow. The hare counted, once, twice, thrice, and away, and went off like a whirlwind down the field. The hedgehog, however, only ran about 3 paces, and then he stooped down in the furrow and stayed quietly where he was. When the hare therefore arrived in full career at the lower end of the field, the hedgehog's wife met him with the cry, "I am here already." The hare was shocked and wondered not a little. He thought no other than that it was the hedgehog himself who was calling to him, for the hedgehog's wife looked just like her husband. The hare, however, thought to himself, "That has not been done fairly," and cried, "It must be run again. Let us have it again." And once more he went off like the wind in a storm, so that he seemed to fly. But the hedgehog's wife stayed quietly in her place. So, when the hare reached the top of the field, the hedgehog himself cried out to him, "I am here already." The hare, however, quite beside himself with anger, cried, "It must be run again. We must have it again." "All right," answered the hedgehog. "For my part will run as often as you choose." So the hare ran 73 times more, and the hedgehog always held out against him. And every time the hare reached either the top or the bottom, either the hedgehog or his wife said, "I am here already." At the 74th time, however, the hare could no longer reach the end. In the middle of the field, he fell to the ground. Blood streamed out of his mouth, and he lay dead on the spot. But the hedgehog took the louis d'or which he had won, and the bottle of brandy, called his wife out of the furrow, and both went home together in great delight, and if they are not dead, they are living there still. This is how it happened that the hedgehog made the hare run races with him on the Buxtehuder Heath till he died, and since that time no hare has ever had any fancy for running races with a Buxtehuder hedgehog. The moral of this story, however, is, firstly, that no one, however great he may be, should permit himself to jest at anyone beneath him, even if he be only a hedgehog. And secondly, it teaches that when a man marries, he should take a wife in his own position, who looks just as he himself looks. So whosoever is a hedgehog, let him see to it that his wife is a hedgehog also, and so forth. The Blue Light. There was once, on a time, a soldier who for many years had served the king faithfully, but when the war came to an end, could serve no longer, because of the many wounds which he had received. The king said to him, "Thou mayest return to thy home. I need thee no longer, and thou wilt not receive any more money, for he only receives wages who renders me service for them." Then the soldier did not know how to earn a living, went away greatly troubled, and walked the whole day until in the evening he entered a forest. When darkness came on, he saw a light which he went up to, and came to a house wherein lived a witch. "Do give me one night's lodging, and a little to eat and drink," said he to her, "or I shall starve." "Oh-ho," she answered, "who gives anything to a runaway soldier? Yet will I be compassionate and take you in, if you will do what I wish." "What do you wish?" said the soldier. "That you should dig all round my garden for me tomorrow." The soldier consented, and next day labored with all his strength, but could not finish it by the evening. "I see well enough," said the witch, "that you can do no more today, but I will keep you yet another night, in payment for which you must tomorrow chop me a load of wood and make it small." The soldier spent the whole day in doing it, and in the evening the witch proposed that he should stay one night more. "Tomorrow you shall only do me a very trifling piece of work. Behind my house there is an old dry well, into which my light has fallen. It burns blue, and never goes out, and you shall bring it up again for me." Next day the old woman took him to the well, and let him down in a basket. He found the blue light, and made her a signal to draw him up again. She did draw him up, but when he came near the edge, she stretched down her hand and wanted to take the blue light away from him. "No," said he, perceiving her evil intention. "I will not give thee the light until I am standing with both feet upon the ground." The witch fell into a passion, let him down again into the well, and went away. The poor soldier fell without injury on the moist ground, and the blue light went on burning. But of what use was that to him? He saw very well that he could not escape death. He sat for a while very sorrowfully. Then suddenly he felt in his pocket and found his tobacco pipe, which was still half full. "This shall be my last pleasure," thought he, pulled it out, lit it at the blue light, and began to smoke. When the smoke had circled about the cavern, suddenly a little black dwarf stood before him and said, "Lord, what are thy commands?" "What commands have I to give thee?" replied the soldier, quite astonished. "I must do everything thou biddest me," said the little man. "Good," said the soldier. "Then in the first place help me out of this well." The little man took him by the hand and led him through an underground passage, but he did not forget to take the blue light with him. On the way, the dwarf showed him the treasures which the witch had collected and hidden there, and the soldier took as much gold as he could carry. When he was above, he said to the little man, "Now go and bind the old witch and carry her before the judge." In a short time, she, with frightful cries, came riding by, as swift as the wind on a wild tomcat. Nor was it long after that before the little man reappeared. "It is all done," said he, "and the witch is already hanging on the gallows." "What further commands has my lord?" inquired the dwarf. "At this moment, none," answered the soldier. "Thou canst return home, only be at hand immediately, if I summon thee. Nothing more is needed than that thou shouldst light thy pipe at the blue light, and I will appear before thee at once." Thereupon he vanished from his sight. The soldier returned to the town from which he had come. He went to the best inn, ordered himself handsome clothes, and then bade the landlord furnish him a room as handsomely as possible. When it was ready, and the soldier had taken possession of it, he summoned the little black mannequin and said, "I have served the king faithfully, but he has dismissed me and left me to hunger, and now I want to take my revenge." "What am I to do?" asked the little man. "Late at night, when the king's daughter is in bed, bring her here in her sleep. She shall do servant's work for me." The mannequin said, "That is an easy thing for me to do, but a very dangerous thing for you, for if it is discovered, you will fare ill." When 12 o'clock had struck, the door sprang open, and the mannequin carried in the princess. "Aha! Art thou there?" cried the soldier. "Get to thy work at once. Fetch the broom and sweep the chamber." When she had done this, he ordered her to come to his chair, and then he stretched out his feet and said, "Pull off my boots for me." And then he threw them in her face and made her pick them up again and clean and brighten them. She, however, did everything he bade her, without opposition, silently and with half-shut eyes. When the first cock crowed, the mannequin carried her back to the royal palace and laid her in her bed. Next morning, when the princess arose, she went to her father and told him that she had had a very strange dream. "I was carried through the streets with the rapidity of lightning," said she, "and taken into a soldier's room, and I had to wait upon him like a servant, sweep his room, clean his boots, and do all kinds of menial work. It was only a dream, and yet I am just as tired as if I really had done everything." "The dream may have been true," said the king. "I will give thee a piece of advice. Fill thy pocket full of peas, and make a small hole in it. And then, if thou art carried away again, they will fall out and leave a track in the streets." But unseen by the king, the mannequin was standing beside him when he said that, and heard all. At night, when the sleeping princess was again carried through the streets, some peas certainly did fall out of her pocket, but they made no track, for the crafty mannequin had just before scattered peas in every street there was. And again, the princess was compelled to do servant's work until cock-crow. Next morning, the king sent his people out to seek the track, but it was all in vain, for in every street poor children were sitting, picking up peas and saying, "It must have rained peas last night." "We must think of something else," said the king. "Keep thy shoes on when thou goest to bed, and before thou comest back from the place where thou art taken, hide one of them there. I will soon contrive to find it." The black mannequin heard this plot, and at night, when the soldier again ordered him to bring the princess, revealed it to him, and told him that he knew of no expedient to counteract this stratagem, and that if the shoe were found in the soldier's house, it would go badly with him. "Do what I bid thee," replied the soldier. And again, this third night, the princess was obliged to work like a servant, but before she went away, she hid her shoe under the bed. Next morning, the king had the entire town searched for his daughter's shoe. It was found at the soldier's, and the soldier himself, who at the entreaty of the dwarf had gone outside the gate, was soon brought back and thrown into prison. In his flight, he had forgotten the most valuable things he had, the blue light and the gold, and had only 1 ducat in his pocket. And now, loaded with chains, he was standing at the window of his dungeon, when he chanced to see one of his comrades passing by. The soldier tapped at the pane of glass, and when this man came up, said to him, "Be so kind as to fetch me the small bundle I have left lying in the inn, and I will give you a ducat for doing it." His comrade ran thither and brought him what he wanted. As soon as the soldier was alone, again he lighted his pipe and summoned the black mannequin. "Have no fear," said the latter to his master. "Go wheresoever they take you, and let them do what they will. Only take the blue light with you." Next day the soldier was tried, and though he had done nothing wicked, the judge condemned him to death. When he was led forth to die, he begged a last favor of the king. "What is it?" asked the king. "That I may smoke 1 more pipe on my way." "Thou mayest smoke 3, answered the king, "but do not imagine that I will spare thy life." Then the soldier pulled out his pipe and lighted it at the blue light, and as soon as a few wreaths of smoke had ascended, the mannequin was there with a small cudgel in his hand, and said, "What does my lord command?" "Strike down to earth that false judge there, and his constable, and spare not the king who has treated me so ill." Then the mannequin fell on them like lightning, darting this way and that way, and whosoever was so much as touched by his cudgel fell to earth, and did not venture to stir again. The king was terrified. He threw himself on the soldier's mercy, and merely to be allowed to live at all, gave him his kingdom for his own, and the princess to wife. The Spirit in the Glass Bottle. Once, in a quiet village where the roofs smoked gently in the early morning, and the woods lay dark and deep beyond the fields, there lived a poor woodcutter. His hands were hard as oak bark, and his back bent daily beneath the burden of labor. From dawn until the last light faded from the sky, He swung his axe, splitting logs for those wealthier than himself. Though his life was filled with toil, his heart carried a single treasure, his only son. For many years, the woodcutter set aside a few coins whenever he could, denying himself comforts so that the boy might grow into something more than a mere hewer of wood. At last, when the small bag of money jingled with the weight of his long sacrifice, he called his son and said, "My child, you are all I have in this world, the sweat of my brow, the calluses of my hands. These I gladly give to you. Go forth and learn an honest trade. Fill your head with knowledge, so that when my limbs are too stiff to carry me to the forest, and my eyes are too dim to guide the axe, you may sustain me in my old age." The boy, whose heart was tender and eager, obeyed. He went away to a university, where towers rose high and bells tolled the hours of study. He bent himself earnestly to his lessons. His teachers, wise men with books heavy as stones, praised his diligence, and in time the boy began to shine among his peers. Yet learning is like a vast forest. One may walk long paths and still see only the edge of its mysteries. Before he could master all the arts, the small store of his father's money was gone, as a brook runs dry in summer. With a heavy heart, the son returned to his humble home. The father, seeing him, shook his head in sorrow. "Alas, my boy, I can give no more. These are hard days. My hands can scarcely earn us bread, let alone your schooling." But the son laid a hand upon his father's shoulder and spoke gently. "Do not grieve, dear father. If it is God's will, all shall yet be well. What is written for me will come to pass. I will not fall into despair." The next morning, as the father prepared to go into the woods with his single axe, the son declared, "I will go with you, father, and share the work." The father frowned. "No, my son, you are not hardened to such labor. Your hands are made for books, not for rough timber. And besides, I have but one axe. I cannot buy another." "Then ask our neighbor," replied the boy. "He will lend his axe until I have earned enough to buy my own." So the father, though doubtful, borrowed an axe, and together they set out at dawn. The forest greeted them with mist and birdsong. The son worked beside his father with cheerful spirit, though his strokes were clumsy compared to the old man's seasoned blows. By noon, when the sun blazed high above the trees, the father sank wearily upon a log and said, "Let us rest now, eat our bread, and gather strength for the afternoon." But the son laughed lightly. "Rest if you wish, father. I am not yet tired. I will wander a little and look for birds' nests among the branches." "You foolish boy," muttered the father. "Idle wandering will sap your strength. Then you will be too weary to help me." Yet the son only smiled, slung his crust of bread in his hand, and went off into the green shade. He walked long beneath the rustling canopy, delighting in the whisper of leaves. At last he came to a mighty oak, so vast that 5 strong men could not have encircled its trunk. The roots curled from the earth like ancient serpents, and the branches towered like a cathedral roof. "Surely," thought the boy, "many a bird has nested in such a tree." As he gazed upward, he suddenly heard a muffled cry. "Let me out! Oh, let me out!" Startled, he turned about, but no one was there. Again came the cry, low and strained, as though from the very ground. He bent down and called, "Where are you?" The voice answered faintly, "Here, among the oak's roots. Release me." Curious and without fear, the student scratched away the soil. There, hidden in a hollow, he found a glass bottle. Something leapt inside it like a frog, knocking against the sides. Again came the cry, "Let me out." Thinking no harm, the youth drew out the cork. In an instant a dark vapor poured forth, twisting and swelling, until a monstrous spirit towered before him, half as tall as the ancient oak. The earth trembled beneath its weight, and its voice roared like a storm. "Do you know your reward for freeing me?" The boy, though trembling inwardly, kept his face calm. "No, indeed. What reward do you mean?" "Your reward is death," thundered the spirit. "I must break your neck." "Had I known such was the thanks I should receive," said the lad coolly, "I would have left you in your prison. But my head shall not be forfeit so quickly. Let others be consulted." "Others or none," bellowed the spirit, "you are mine. Long centuries have I lain imprisoned. This was no gift, but punishment. I am the mighty Mercurius, and he who sets me free must die." "Not so fast," answered the boy. "How am I to know you truly came from so small a bottle? Prove it. Enter again, and then I will believe your tale. After that, you may do with me as you will." In his pride, the spirit sneered. A simple trick. And he shrank, twisting and dwindling, until once more he slipped into the narrow glass. The instant he had done so, the clever student clapped the cork back and thrust the bottle into the roots. The spirit raged within, but his prison held him fast. The boy turned to go, but the voice cried again, this time piteous and pleading. "Let me out, kind youth. Let me out, and I will grant you riches beyond measure." "Never again," said the boy. "Once you sought my life, why should I trust you?" "Have mercy," begged the spirit. "I swear no harm shall befall you. Rather, I will bestow gifts greater than gold." The youth pondered. "Perhaps fortune favors the bold. Very well, I shall try you once more." He drew the cork, and the spirit rose, vast as before. Yet instead of striking the boy down, he placed in his hands a little strip of rag, plain as a scrap from a beggar's coat. "This is your reward," said Mercurius. "With one end, touch any wound and it will heal. With the other, touch iron or steel, and it shall become silver." Eager to test, the student gashed the bark of a tree with his axe, rubbed it with the cloth, and behold, the wound closed as if it had never been cut. Satisfied, he bowed. "We are quits. Farewell." When he returned, his father scolded, "Idle boy, you ran off and left the work undone." "Be patient, father. I will make it right." He rubbed the borrowed axe with the cloth and struck a mighty blow. But alas, the iron had turned to silver, and the blade bent like lead. The father wrung his hands. "What mischief is this? Now I must pay for the ruined axe, and I have nothing left." "Do not fret," said the son. "I will see to it." And he carried the silver axe into town, where a goldsmith weighed it and declared, "This is worth 400 talers, though I cannot pay all at once." He gave 300 on the spot and promised the rest later. The youth returned and pressed 100 talers into his father's hands. "Here, father, you shall want for nothing." The old man gaped. "Child, where did you find such treasure?" So the son told him the tale of the spirit and the gift. With the rest of the money, he returned to the university, and because he could heal all wounds with his miraculous rag, he soon became the most famous doctor in all the world. And his father, who had once feared poverty in his old age, lived out his days in comfort and honor, blessing the wisdom and courage of his son. Puss in Boots. A miller had 3 sons. His mill, a donkey and a tomcat. The sons had to grind, the donkey had to get grain and carry flour away, and the cat had to catch the mice away. When the miller died, the three brothers divided their inheritance. The oldest received the mill, the second the donkey, and the third the tomcat. Further was nothing left for him. Thereon he was sad and spoke to himself, "But I have gotten all the worst. My oldest brother can mill, my second can ride on his donkey. What can I start with the tomcat? Let me make a pair of fur gloves out of his pelt, so it's over." "Listen," said the tomcat, who had understood everything. What he said, "You do not need to kill me to get a pair of bad gloves from my pelt. Let only a pair of boots be made for me, that I can go out and be seen among the people. Then you will soon be helped." The miller's son was in wonderment that the tomcat so spoke, but because the shoemaker just walked by, he called him in and let a pair of boots be measured for him. When they were ready, the tomcat put them on, took a sack, made the bottom of the same full of corn, but on the top a string, with which one could pull it closed. Then he threw it over his back and went on 2 legs, like a human, out the door. In those days reigned a king in the land. He liked to eat partridges so much. There was a need that none were to be gotten. The whole forest was full, but they were so shy that no hunter could reach them. The tomcat knew that and considered to do his matter better. When he came into the forest, he made the sack open, spread the corn apart, but the cord he laid into the grass and led it behind a hedge. There he hid himself, snuck around, and lurked. The partridges soon came running, and one after the other hopped into the sack. When a good quantity was in it, the tomcat pulled the cord closed, ran to and twisted their heads around. Then he threw the sack over his shoulder and went straight away to the king's palace. The watch cried, "Halt! Where to?" "To the king," answered the tomcat quickly. "Are you crazed? A tomcat to the king?" "Just let him go," said another. "The king has often boredom. Maybe the tomcat makes him amused with his humming and spinning." When the tomcat came in front of the king, he made a reverence and said, "My Hare, the Graf." With that he named his long and distinguished name, lets himself be recommended to the Hare King, and sends him these partridges that he just caught in slings. The king, astonished over the beautiful fat partridges, knew not out of pleasure how to contain himself, and commanded that the tomcat be given as much gold out of the treasure chamber into his sack as he could carry. That bring to your heron and thank him again many times for his gift. But the poor miller's son sat at home at the window, supported his head and his hand, and thought that he had spent his last for the tomcat's boots, and what large things will he be able to bring back. Thereon the tomcat stepped in, threw the sack from his hack, untied it open, and shook the gold in front of the miller. "There you have something for the hoots. The king also greets you and says many thanks to you." The miller was glad over the wealth, without understanding rightly how it came to be. But the tomcat, as he took off his boots, told him everything. Then he said, "You do have money enough now, but it should not stay with that. Tomorrow I will put my boots on again. You will become richer still. I also told the king that you are a Graf." On the next day the torn cat went, as he had said, well booted to hunting again, and brought the king a rich catch. So it went all days, and the tomcat brought gold home all days, and was so popular as one by the king that he was allowed to come in and go out and prowl around in the palace where he wanted. One time, the tomcat stood in the king's kitchen by the stove and warmed himself. Thereon came the coachman and cursed, "I wish king and the princess were at the executioner. I wanted to go to Wirt's house and drink once and play cards. There I should drive them spazieren at the lake." As the tomcat heard that, he snuck home and told his hern, "If a Graf you want to be and become rich, so come outside with me to the lake and bathe yourself therein." The miller did not know what he should say to that, but followed the tomcat, went with him, undressed Splinter naked, and sprang into the water. But the tomcat took his clothes, carried them away, and hid them. No sooner was he finished with that, thereon came the king driving by. The tomcat immediately began, pathetically, to lament, "Ach, all-merciful king, mine Hare bathed himself here in the lake. Thereon a thief came and stole his clothes that lay on the shore. Now the Herr Graf is in the water and cannot come out, and if he stays in longer, he will couch cold and die." When the king heard that, he called halt, and one of his people had to chase back, and of the king's clothes bring hack. The Herr Graf put on the magnificent clothes, and because the king anyway for the partridges that he thought to have received from him held his worth, so he had to sit with them in the carriage. The princess was also not upset over it, because the Graf was young and handsome, and she liked him quite well. But the tomcat went ahead and came to a large grass field, where over 100 people were making hay. "Who does this grass field belong to, you people?" said the tomcat. "The great magician. Listen, the king will soon drive by when he asks who the grass field belongs to, so answer, the Grafen, and if you do not do that, you will all be struck dead." Thereon the tomcat went further and came to a grain field, so large that no one could oversee it. There stood more than 200 people and cut the grain. "Whose grain is this, you people?" "The magician." "Listen, the king will drive by now when he asks who the grain belongs to. So answer, the Grafen, and if you do not do that, thou will all be struck dead." Finally, the tomcat came to a magnificent forest. There stood more than 300 people, felled the big oaks and made wood. "Whose forest is this, you people?" "The magician." "Listen, the king will drive by now when he asks who the forest belongs to, so answer, the Grafen, and if you do not do that, you will all be killed." The tomcat went still further. The people all looked after him, and because he looked so wonderly, and as a human walked in the boots, they were afraid of him. He soon came to the magician's palace, stepped boldly in and in front of him. The magician looked at him contemptuously and asked him what he wanted. The tomcat made a reverence and said, "I have beard, that thou could transform yourself into every animal you chose by your own will. What a hound, fox, or even wolf concerns, that I will well believe, but of an elephant, that seems to me quite impossible, and therefore I have come to convince myself." The magician said proudly, "That is a trifle to me," and in that wink of an eye was transformed into an elephant. "That is much, but also in a lion?" "That is also nothing," said the magician, and stood as a lion in front of the tomcat. The tomcat made as if startled, and cried, "That is unbelievable and unheard of. The same I would never have dreamt of coming into my thoughts, but more still, all else, it would be, if you could transform yourself into such a small animal as a mouse is, you can certainly do more than any other magician in the world, but that will be certainly too high for you." The magician was very friendly from the sweet words and said, "O ja, dear catlet, that I can also," and sprang as a mouse around the room. The tom cat was after him, caught the mouse with one jump, and ate him up. But the king was still driving spazieren with the Grafen and the princess, and came to the large field. "Who does the hay belong to?" asked the king. "The Herr Grafen," cried all, as the tom cat had commanded them. "Thou have a pretty piece of land, Herr Graf," said he. Thereafter they came to the large grain field. "Who does the grain belong to, you people?" "The Herrn Grafen." "Eh, Herr Graf, large, big estates." "Thereon to the forest." "Who does the wood belong to, you people?" "The Herrn Grafen." The king was astonished even more, and said, "Thou must be a rich man." "Herr Graf, I do not believe that I have such a magnificent forest." Finally they came to the palace. The tom cat stood on top of the stairs, and as the wagon stopped below, he sprang down, opened the door, and said, "Herr King, thou comest to the palace of my Herr, the Graf, that this honors him and makes him hap of his life day long." The king stepped out and marveled at the magnificent building that was almost larger and more beautiful than his own palace. But the Graf led the princess up the stairs into the hall that was shimmering with gold and precious stones. Thereon the princess was promised to the Graf, and when the king died, he was king. But the booted tom cat became first minister. Ferdinand the Faithful. Once on a time lived a man and a woman who, so long as they were rich, had no children. But when they were poor, they had a little boy. They could, however, find no godfather for him. So the man said he would just go to another place to see if he could get one there. As he went, a poor man met him, who asked him where he was going. He said he was going to see if he could get a godfather, that he was poor, so no one would stand as godfather for him. "Oh," said the poor man, "you are poor, and I am poor. I will be godfather for you, but I am so ill off I can give the child nothing. Go home and tell the nurse that she is to come to the church with the child." When they all got to the church together, the beggar was already there, and he gave the child the name of Ferdinand the Faithful. When he was going out of the church, the beggar said, "Now go home. I can give you nothing, and you likewise ought to give me nothing." But he gave a key to the nurse, and told her when she got home, she was to give it to the father, who was to take care of it until the child was 14 years old. And then he was to go on the heath, where there was a castle which the key would fit, and that all which was therein should belong to him. Now, when the child was 7 years old and had grown very big, he once went to play with some other boys, and each of them boasted that he had got more from his godfather than the other. But the child could say nothing and was vexed, and went home and said to his father, "Did I get nothing at all, then, from my godfather?" "Oh, yes," said the father. "Thou hadst a key. If there is a castle standing on the heath, just go to it and open it." Then the boy went thither, but no castle was to be seen or heard of. After 7 years more, when he was 14 years old, he again went thither, and there stood the castle. When he had opened it, there was nothing within but a horse, a white one. Then the boy was so full of joy because he had a horse that he mounted on it and galloped back to his father. "Now I have a white horse, and I will travel," said he. So he set out, and as he was on his way, a pen was lying on the road. At first he thought he would pick it up, but then again he thought to himself, Thou shouldst leave it lying there. Thou wilt easily find a pen where thou art going, if thou hast need of one." As he was thus riding away, a voice called after him, "Ferdinand the Faithful, take it with thee." He looked around, but saw no one. Then he went back again and picked it up. When he had ridden a little way farther, he passed by a lake, and a fish was lying on the bank, gasping and panting for breath. So he said, "Wait, my dear fish, I will help thee get into the water." And he took hold of it by the tail and threw it into the lake. Then the fish put its head out of the water and said, "As thou hast helped me out of the mud, I will give thee a flute. When thou art in any need, play on it, and then I will help thee. And if ever thou lettest anything fall in the water, just play, and I will reach it out to thee." Then he rode away, and there came to him a man who asked him where he was going. "Oh, to the next place." Then what his name was? Ferdinand the Faithful. So, then we have got almost the same name. I am called Ferdinand the Unfaithful. And they both set out to the inn in the nearest place. Now it was unfortunate that Ferdinand the Unfaithful knew everything that the other had ever thought and everything he was about to do. He knew it by means of all kinds of wicked arts. There was, however, in the inn an honest girl who had a bright face and behaved very prettily. She fell in love with Ferdinand the Faithful because he was a handsome man, and she asked him whither he was going. "Oh, I am just traveling round about," said he. Then she said he ought to stay there, for the king of that country wanted an attendant or an outrider, and he ought to enter his service. He answered he could not very well go to anyone like that and offer himself. Then said the maiden, "Oh, but I will soon do that for you." And so she went straight to the king, and told him that she knew of an excellent servant for him. He was well pleased with that, and had Ferdinand the Faithful brought to him, and wanted to make him his servant. He, however, liked better to be an outrider, for where his horse was, there he also wanted to be. So the king made him an outrider. When Ferdinand the Unfaithful learnt that, he said to the girl, "What? Dost thou help him and not me?" "Oh," said the girl, "I will help thee too." She thought, "I must keep friends with that man, for he is not to be trusted." She went to the king and offered him as a servant, and the king was willing. Now, when the king met his lords in the morning, he always lamented and said, "Oh, if I had but my love with me." Ferdinand the Unfaithful was, however, always hostile to Ferdinand the Faithful. So once, when the king was complaining thus, he said, "You have the outrider, send him away to get her, and if he does not do it, his head must be struck off." Then the king sent for Ferdinand the Faithful, and told him that there was, in this place or in that place, a girl he loved, and that he was to bring her to him, and if he did not do it, he should die. Ferdinand the Faithful went into the stable to his white horse, and complained and lamented, "Oh, what an unhappy man I am!" Then someone behind him cried, "Ferdinand the Faithful, why weepest thou?" He looked round but saw no one, and went on lamenting, "Oh, my dear little white horse, now must I leave thee, now must I die. Then someone cried once more, "Ferdinand the Faithful, why weepest thou?" Then for the first time he was aware that it was his little white horse who was putting that question. "Dost thou speak, my little white horse? Canst thou do that?" And again he said, "I am to go to this place and to that, and am to bring the bride. Canst thou tell me how I am to set about it?" Then answered the little white horse, Go thou to the king, and say if he will give thou what thou must have, thou wilt get her for him. If he will give thee a ship full of meat and a ship full of bread, it will succeed. Great giants dwell on the lake, and if thou takest no meat with thee for them, they will tear thee to pieces. And there are the large birds which would pick the eyes out of thy head, if thou hadst no bread for them. Then the king made all the butchers in the land kill, and all the bakers bake, that the ships might be filled. When they were full, the little white horse said to Ferdinand the Faithful, Now mount me, and go with me into the ship, and then when the giants come, say, Peace, peace, my dear little giants, I have had thought of ye, something I have brought for ye. And when the birds come, thou shalt again say, Peace, peace, my dear little birds, I have had thought of ye, something I have brought for ye. Then they will do nothing to thee, and when thou comest to the castle, the giants will help thee. Then go up to the castle, and take a couple of giants with thee. There the princess lies sleeping. Thou must, however, not awaken her, but the giants must lift her up, and carry her in her bed to the ship. And now everything took place as the little white horse had said, and Ferdinand the Faithful gave the giants and the birds what he had brought with him for them, and that made the giants willing, and they carried the princess in her bed to the king. And when she came to the king, she said she could not live. She must have her writings. They had been left in her castle. Then, by the instigation of Ferdinand the Unfaithful, Ferdinand the Faithful was called, and the king told him he must fetch the writings from the castle, or he should die. Then he went once more into the stable, and bemoaned himself, and said, O my dear little white horse, now I am to go away again. How am I to do it? Then the little white horse said he was just to load the ships full again. So it happened again, as it had happened before, and the giants and the birds were satisfied, and made gentle by the meat. When they came to the castle, the white horse told Ferdinand the Faithful that he must go in, and that on the table in the princess's bedroom lay the writings. And Ferdinand the Faithful went in and fetched them. When they were on the lake, he let his pen fall into the water. Then said the white horse, Now I cannot help thee at all. But he remembered his flute, and began to play on it, and the fish came with the pen in its mouth, and gave it to him. So he took the writings to the castle, where the wedding was celebrated. The queen, however, did not love the king because he had no nose, but she would have much liked to love Ferdinand the Faithful. Once, therefore, when all the lords of the court were together, the queen said she could do feats of magic, that she could cut off anyone's head and put it on again, and that one of them ought just to try it. But none of them would be the first, so Ferdinand the Faithful, again, at the instigation of Ferdinand the Unfaithful, undertook it, and she hewed off his head, and put it on again for him, and it healed together directly, so that it looked as if he had a red thread round his throat. Then the king said to her, My child, and where hast thou learnt that? Yes, she said, I understand the art. Shall I just try it on thee also? Oh, yes, said he. But she cut off his head, and did not put it on again, but pretended that she could not get it on, and that it would not keep fixed. Then the king was buried, but she married Ferdinand the Faithful. He, however, always rode on his white horse, and once, when he was seated on it, it told him that he was to go on to the heath, which he knew, and gallop 3 times round it. And when he had done that, the white horse stood up on its hind legs, and was changed into a king's son.